In a quiet suburban neighborhood, life moved at a slow, comfortable pace. The streets were lined with trees, neatly trimmed lawns, and houses that all looked fairly similar, giving the area a cozy, safe feeling. It was the kind of place where neighbors waved at each other during morning walks and children played outside until the sun dipped below the horizon. But amid this calm and ordinary life, something unusual was about to unfold. The couple had recently moved into the neighborhood. They were well liked by those around them, not because they tried too hard, but because they had a quiet charm that drew people in naturally. The wife, in particular, had a presence that was impossible to ignore. She was kind, confident, and had a smile that could light up a room. Her husband admired her endlessly, not just for her warmth and intelligence, but for a talent few people knew about. One thing that immediately stood out about them in the neighborhood was the car they owned. It wasn't just any car. It was sleek, polished to perfection, and had an aura of speed and power even when parked. It gleamed under the sunlight, reflecting its surroundings like a mirror, and drew the occasional envious glance from those who walked or drove by. It was the kind of car that told you its owner cared deeply about it, and that it wasn't just a tool for getting from one place to another. For the couple, the car was more than just a vehicle. It was a part of their identity, a piece of their life that represented countless hours of dedication, skill, and passion. The wife had worked hard to achieve her dreams, and this car symbolized a piece of that journey. It was her sanctuary on wheels, a place where she felt in control and free, where the stress of everyday life melted away. Not everyone in the neighborhood, however, saw things the same way. Across the street lived a teenage boy who had a reputation for being conceited and demanding. He was the kind of kid who believed that the world owed him favors simply because he existed. His parents had raised him in comfort, giving him whatever he wanted, and as a result he had developed a sense of entitlement that was hard to miss. His presence in the neighborhood was a topic of quiet frustration for many residents, though few ever confronted him directly. The first time the teenage boy noticed the car, he was out riding his bike along the street. He slowed down abruptly when he saw it parked in the driveway, and squinted as if trying to convince himself it was real. It was shiny, aggressive in design, and clearly well taken care of. His eyes lit up with a mix of admiration and greed. He had never seen a car like that up close, and his mind immediately began racing with possibilities. He didn't want to just admire it from afar. He wanted to own the experience of it, to sit in it, to feel the engine roar under his command. Over the next few days, he started observing the couple more closely. He noticed their routines, the times they left the house, the moments they returned, the way the wife sometimes polished the car herself. To him, this car wasn't just a vehicle. It was a trophy that he believed should belong to someone with the audacity to claim it. He began making subtle comments when he saw the couple outside, remarks meant to impress and hint at his supposed entitlement. At first, the couple didn't pay much attention. They were aware of the boy's personality, having heard small whispers from neighbors, but they assumed he was just another teenager testing boundaries. They smiled politely, nodded at his comments, and continued with their day. They had no interest in engaging with someone so immature and self-centered, especially over a car that represented so much more than just metal and paint. But teenagers with strong senses of entitlement rarely take subtle hints. The boy's fascination with the car grew each day, and so did his audacity. He began leaving small notes in the driveway, messages scrawled on paper that ranged from compliments to veiled demands. "Nice car. Hope I can drive it someday," one read. Another simply stated, "This car should be mine." Each note was left in plain sight, a challenge disguised as admiration. The wife discovered the first note one morning when she went to get the mail. She picked it up and read it with a mixture of surprise and amusement. At first she laughed, thinking it was a prank. She had seen many unusual things in her life, but nothing quite like this. Her husband, however, looked concerned. He could see the beginnings of a pattern, a sense of obsession forming that could become problematic if not addressed. They decided to ignore it initially, hoping that the boy would lose interest and move on to something else. Ignoring it didn't work. Instead, the boy's behavior escalated. He began showing up at the edge of their driveway more frequently, lingering as if hoping to catch a glimpse of the wife driving, or to find a moment when he could ask, in person, to sit behind the wheel. His demeanor was brazen. He didn't just want to look at the car. He wanted it, or at least to assert some claim over it. The couple noticed him watching from across the street, pretending to be casual while clearly focused on the car. Neighbors began to notice too. A few mentioned seeing the boy hover near the driveway and had begun whispering about how bold he was. Some found it amusing. Others found it irritating. But the couple maintained their calm, choosing not to confront the teenager publicly. They didn't want to escalate the situation in a way that could create tension in their otherwise peaceful neighborhood. One afternoon, the boy took things further. He approached the driveway when the couple was outside, wearing a smug smile that betrayed his confidence. He leaned against the fence, arms crossed, and made a comment that was both bold and entitled. "That car is amazing. You know, I could probably drive it better than anyone around here," he said, half in jest, half as a veiled threat. The wife looked at him calmly, not with anger, but with a steady, unshakable presence. She replied evenly, "It's not just a car to us. It's part of our life, and we don't lend it out." Her tone was polite but firm, a subtle signal that this conversation was over. The boy, however, didn't get the hint. He smirked, seemingly unfazed, and muttered something under his breath before cycling away slowly, pretending to ride casually while clearly plotting his next move. Days turned into a week, and the situation became a small, persistent tension in the neighborhood. Every glance from the boy felt like a challenge, every comment a test. The couple continued their routines, refusing to let the teen's arrogance disturb their peace. They took extra care when leaving the house, sometimes parking the car in less obvious spots or moving it behind other vehicles to avoid unnecessary attention. Yet the boy's fascination didn't waver. Each passing day seemed to fuel his sense of entitlement further. The wife couldn't help but feel a mix of irritation and concern. On one hand, she knew the boy meant no real harm. He was just testing limits, acting out of ignorance and privilege. On the other hand, she couldn't ignore the underlying audacity of someone assuming they could make demands simply because they wanted something. She had dealt with challenges before, ones that tested her patience and resolve. But this situation had a strange, almost surreal quality to it. A teenager, fueled by ego, thinking he could stake a claim on something that had taken years of dedication to achieve. The husband watched her carefully, silently supporting her approach. He admired the way she handled herself, calm, composed, and unyielding. He knew that confrontation could easily spiral out of control, especially with a teenager whose understanding of boundaries was skewed. Together, they formed an unspoken strategy: maintain composure, set clear boundaries, and avoid giving the boy the reaction he seemed to crave. But in the back of their minds, they both knew this was only the beginning. Entitlement, especially when unchecked, had a way of growing. The teenager had tasted the thrill of attention and the sense of power in thinking he could influence someone else's life. The couple had no intention of yielding, but they also understood that the coming days might test their patience and ingenuity in ways they hadn't yet imagined. And so, life in the quiet neighborhood continued, but with an undercurrent of tension. The car gleamed in the driveway as always, a symbol of pride and accomplishment. The teenage boy watched from across the street, his curiosity turning into obsession. For the couple, it was a test of patience, strategy, and character. Little did they know, this unusual clash of personalities and expectations was only the beginning of a story that would challenge assumptions, test boundaries, and reveal surprising truths about talent, respect, and humility. The calm suburban streets would soon witness events that no one could have predicted, all starting with the simple, seemingly innocent act of a teenager demanding something that was never his to take. The days following the first bold encounter with the teenage neighbor felt heavier for the couple. They continued their routines, but there was now a subtle tension in the air. Each time they stepped out of the house, there was a brief glance across the street, a check to see if the boy was watching again. He seemed to have a sixth sense about the car, appearing whenever they least expected it, leaning against fences or trees, his gaze fixed and calculating. The wife had tried to focus on her work and hobbies, keeping her mind occupied, but the constant feeling of being observed was draining. She would sometimes stand at the window sipping her coffee and notice the boy riding slowly past, pretending to be casual while clearly studying her movements. It was a strange mix of audacity and arrogance that made her wonder how he could believe anyone would hand over something so personal just because he wanted it. One afternoon, the situation escalated in a way that surprised even the husband. He had been tending to the garden when the boy appeared in the driveway, leaning against the hood of the car as if he owned it. His smile was smug, full of confidence, and his words were sharper than before. "This car is too amazing to just sit here," he said almost mockingly. "You should let me take it for a spin. I could handle it better than anyone." The wife walked up calmly, not letting herself be intimidated. "It's not yours," she said plainly. "You can admire it all you want, but it's not going anywhere with you behind the wheel." The boy's expression didn't falter. If anything, he leaned in closer, trying to assert dominance. "I could make it go faster. I know more about cars than you think. You wouldn't even notice." The husband stepped forward, placing a steady hand on the boy's shoulder, not aggressively, but enough to make him pause. "You need to understand something," he said firmly. "This car is not a toy. It's not for showing off or proving how clever you are. It belongs to us and we decide who drives it." The boy smirked, shrugging as if he hadn't heard a word. "I'll figure something out," he muttered, hopping back onto his bike and riding away. The couple watched him leave, a mixture of relief and apprehension in their hearts. They knew this was far from over. The next day, the wife received a note slipped under the door. It was written in a bold, messy hand. "You'll see. I always get what I want. That car will be mine soon." The words carried a tone of certainty that was unnerving. The wife's first reaction was to stay calm and not give it attention, but the underlying threat was impossible to ignore. She showed the note to her husband, who frowned. "This isn't just a kid testing limits anymore," he said. "This is deliberate. He thinks he can pressure us into giving him something that isn't his." They decided to inform a few neighbors discreetly, not to make a scene, but to ensure there were witnesses if anything escalated further. A couple of residents had seen the boy loitering near the driveway before, and their concern mirrored the couple's own. While most teenagers are just curious or playful, this boy's entitlement was unique and troubling. That evening, the wife went for a drive to clear her mind. She drove slowly through the neighborhood, feeling the wind on her face, trying to let go of the growing tension. But as she returned home, she noticed the boy across the street pretending to be on his phone but clearly watching the driveway. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that showing fear or irritation would only encourage him. The following week, the boy's behavior escalated further. He began showing up at the edges of the driveway at different times of the day, sometimes lingering for hours, sometimes darting away when he thought the couple might notice. His audacity had grown. He didn't even bother to hide his intentions anymore. He believed he had a right to approach, to make demands, and to test boundaries. One afternoon, the wife confronted him indirectly. She stepped outside while watering the plants, keeping her voice steady. "You need to understand that this isn't appropriate," she said. "You can't just show up and demand something that isn't yours. You need to respect other people's property and privacy." The boy laughed softly, a sound that was more irritating than genuine amusement. "I'm not asking for much," he said. "I just want a chance to see what it's like to drive it. That's all. You're overreacting." The husband, who had joined her by this point, spoke calmly but firmly. "You are overstepping boundaries. This isn't a favor or a game. It's our car, our property. You need to leave now and stop this." The boy finally rode away, but the smirk on his face indicated he was far from finished. He had tasted the thrill of pushing limits, and it was addictive. The couple could only watch, knowing that the next encounter could be more audacious and that they had to be prepared for it. As the days went on, the tension began to ripple through the neighborhood. Other residents noticed the ongoing standoff, whispering among themselves about the boy's arrogance and the couple's composed response. While some found the situation amusing, most were concerned. They had never seen a teenager behave with such audacity, and the question of how far he would go lingered in everyone's minds. Despite the stress, the couple leaned on each other. They shared long evenings talking about the incidents, discussing strategies and reminding themselves not to react impulsively. Their bond grew stronger as they faced this unexpected challenge together. They knew that reacting with anger or frustration could escalate the situation, so they focused on calm, deliberate responses, always keeping their safety and peace of mind in the forefront. One afternoon, the boy decided to try a more direct approach. He knocked on the front door, standing tall and confident, as if he had every right to be there. "I just want to see it," he said, his tone almost challenging. "I'm not going to hurt it. I just want to sit inside." The wife met his gaze steadily. "No," she said simply. "You may admire it from a distance, but this car is not for you." This conversation is over. The boy's brow furrowed slightly, but he didn't argue further. Instead, he left with a half-hearted wave, as if leaving the door open for another attempt later. The couple knew he would be back, but they remained steadfast, determined not to give in to his demands. That evening, the husband and wife reflected on the situation. They realized this was more than just about a car. It was about respect, boundaries, and teaching a lesson that entitlement has limits. They couldn't control the boy's behavior, but they could control their responses. They could show patience, strength, and integrity in the face of arrogance. The week ended with the couple feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. The boy had not returned that day, but they knew it was only a matter of time. They remained vigilant, aware that this was a test of their patience, composure, and unity. The quiet neighborhood had been disrupted by an unexpected challenge, and they were learning how to navigate it without losing their sense of peace. Through it all, the wife maintained her calm and confidence. She knew that giving in or reacting impulsively would only encourage the boy further. Her husband supported her every step, reinforcing their shared boundaries and ensuring they faced the situation as a team. Together, they prepared for whatever might come next, aware that the boy's audacity would continue to test them, but determined not to let it shake their resolve. And so, life continued in the quiet suburban streets, with the couple standing firm against the growing audacity of a conceited teenager. The car remained in its place, gleaming in the driveway, a symbol of the couple's patience, unity, and determination. They knew the next encounter could bring new challenges, but they were ready, facing it with quiet strength and unwavering resolve, confident that respect and boundaries could withstand even the boldest demands of entitlement. As the days turned into weeks, the tension with the teenage neighbor became a constant undercurrent in the couple's life. Every sound outside, every passing car drew their attention, as if the quiet streets were hiding a storm that could erupt at any moment. The boy's audacity showed no signs of fading, and his obsession with the car seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. The wife had tried to maintain her routines, focusing on work, hobbies, and the small joys of everyday life. She enjoyed baking, reading, and tending to her small garden, but now these activities were accompanied by the constant awareness that the boy might be nearby, watching, waiting for an opportunity. The simple act of stepping outside to water the plants or check the mail carried a subtle tension that had never been part of their lives before. The husband had noticed how the wife's patience was being tested, and he admired the way she handled herself. She remained calm and composed, never letting the boy's boldness provoke anger or fear. Still, he could see the strain in her eyes at times, the small signs of frustration that came from dealing with someone so entitled and persistent.
He tried to ease her mind with quiet conversations in the evening,
discussing strategies and reminding her that they were in control of their own lives, no matter how audacious the boy might be. Meanwhile, the boy's actions became more deliberate. He would appear on his bike at odd hours, pretending to ride past casually but always keeping an eye on the driveway. He tried different angles, different times of day, as if testing the couple's patience and trying to find a moment of weakness. Each encounter was like a challenge, a game in his mind, and he seemed determined to win. The neighborhood had begun to notice the pattern as well. Some neighbors would see the boy loitering and whisper among themselves, commenting on his arrogance and persistence. Others, more sympathetic, assumed he was just a curious teenager, overestimating his understanding of boundaries. The couple, however, remained focused on their own strategy: patience, composure, and firm boundaries. They did not want to escalate the situation unnecessarily, but they also would not allow the boy to cross lines. One afternoon, the wife decided to take matters into her own hands, though not in the way the boy might expect. She stepped outside while he was hovering near the end of the driveway and spoke directly, but calmly. "You need to understand that this behavior isn't acceptable," she said. "You can look at the car, but you cannot demand it or expect us to let you drive it. This is our property, and we decide who can use it." The boy laughed softly, a sound that was both irritating and dismissive. "I'm not asking for much," he said. "I just want to see what it's like." "You're overreacting." The husband joined her, standing quietly beside her, his presence adding weight to the words. "This is not about overreacting. It's about respect and boundaries. You are crossing a line and you need to leave now." The boy hesitated for a moment, sensing the seriousness in their tone. He pushed his glasses up and shrugged, attempting to look casual, then mounted his bike and rode away. But the smirk on his face told the couple that this was far from over. He had tasted the thrill of pushing limits and the power of making demands, and he would likely try again. As the week continued, the couple noticed subtle changes in the boy's approach. He began leaving notes, some complimentary, some bold, each one testing boundaries in a different way. "You'll see," one note said. "I always get what I want. That car will be mine soon." The wife read the notes carefully, keeping them in a small drawer as a record. She showed them to her husband, who frowned, recognizing the increasing pattern of entitlement. They also began to notice the effect on the neighborhood. Other residents would quietly mention seeing the boy lingering near the driveway, and a few even suggested approaching his parents. The couple, however, decided to handle it themselves, maintaining their calm and firm stance, knowing that involving others too early could complicate matters and make the boy feel justified in his demands. Despite the tension, the couple tried to maintain normalcy. They hosted small gatherings, went for walks, and continued their routines, refusing to let the boy's behavior dictate their lives. Still, every time the car gleamed in the driveway, there was a reminder of the challenge they faced. The boy's fascination with it had become almost a symbol of his audacity and their patience. One afternoon, the wife received another note slipped under the door. This one was bolder than the previous ones. "You can't hide it forever. I'll get my chance. You'll regret not letting me drive it." The words carried a tone of certainty that was both unnerving and arrogant. The wife took a deep breath and showed it to her husband, who placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "This isn't just about a car anymore," he said quietly. "This is about respect. We need to stay calm and firm. He'll test us, but we can't let him win by reacting out of fear or frustration." The couple discussed strategies late into the evening, talking about ways to protect the car and maintain their peace. They considered security measures, timing their outings to avoid unnecessary confrontations, and keeping a record of the notes and encounters. They also reminded themselves to stay composed and not escalate the situation unnecessarily. As the days went on, the boy's persistence became more noticeable. He would appear at different times, sometimes pretending to be on a phone call or walking a dog, always keeping an eye on the driveway. The couple began to notice the pattern. He was learning their routines, trying to find moments when they might be vulnerable or distracted. It was a test of patience, and the couple was determined not to let him see any sign of weakness. One afternoon, the wife decided to confront the situation differently. She stepped outside with a clear plan, keeping her voice calm but authoritative. "You need to understand that your behavior is inappropriate," she said. "You cannot demand something that isn't yours. We have worked hard for what we have, and you need to respect that." The boy laughed, trying to mask any uncertainty. "I'm not asking for much," he said again. "I just want a chance. It's just a car, right?" The husband, who had joined her, spoke firmly. "It's more than a car. It's our property, our work, and our passion. You are crossing a line, and we won't tolerate it. Leave now and do not return with demands." The boy finally rode away, but his expression showed he was far from defeated. The couple knew that his sense of entitlement would not fade easily. He had learned that making demands and testing boundaries could be thrilling, and he would likely continue in some form. Despite the ongoing tension, the couple remained united. They continued their routines, maintaining a sense of normalcy while staying vigilant. The car remained in the driveway, gleaming as always, a symbol of their perseverance, patience, and unity. They knew the boy's audacity would not fade overnight, but they were confident in their approach, calm, firm, and unwavering. The neighborhood continued to notice the dynamic with whispers and quiet observations. Some residents admired the couple's composure, while others worried about how far the boy might go. The couple, however, focused on their own response, knowing that respect and boundaries were lessons that needed to be maintained without escalation. Through it all, the wife and husband drew strength from each other. They discussed each encounter, each note, and each subtle challenge, always reinforcing their commitment to patience and integrity. They knew the situation was far from over, but they also knew that their united front and calm demeanor would serve as a powerful response to the boy's audacity. As the week ended, the couple felt a mix of relief and anticipation. The boy had not made any bold moves that day, but they were aware that this was a temporary lull. They stayed vigilant, confident that their patience, calm, and firm boundaries would help them navigate whatever audacity the teenager brought next. The quiet streets of their suburban neighborhood remained peaceful on the surface, but beneath it lay a tension that was slowly building, a test of patience and character that neither the couple nor the boy would forget. The days following the ongoing tension with the teenage neighbor brought a strange mixture of anticipation and anxiety for the couple. Every morning, as the sun bathed the suburban streets in a golden glow, there was a subtle awareness that someone might be observing them, silently waiting for an opportunity. The boy's audacity had not diminished, and his fascination with the car seemed almost obsessive. One weekend, the wife decided to attend a local community event. It was a casual gathering of neighbors and friends, held at a nearby park with games, food stalls, and friendly competitions. She saw it as an opportunity to step away from the stress of the past weeks and enjoy a bit of normal life. Little did she know, the event would soon reveal something that would completely shift the dynamic. The boy, as usual, was present. Though he tried to appear as if he was there for the fun and not to observe the couple, he was pretending to help set up games and chatting with other teenagers, but his eyes frequently darted toward the wife, who had arrived with a calm smile and a relaxed demeanor. He was determined to get a closer look at her, still convinced that she was just an ordinary driver who could be intimidated. The wife moved among the crowd, greeting neighbors and enjoying the small talk, unaware that the boy was plotting yet another attempt to impress or intimidate her. The moment came when a car show segment of the event was announced. A small display of local cars, some vintage, some modern, but all admired by enthusiasts. She decided to walk toward the display, curious to see the vehicles and chat with owners. As she approached, the boy followed at a distance, his eyes fixed on her, not on the cars. He finally decided this was the moment to make a move. He stepped closer, attempting to strike up a conversation, hoping to impress her with his knowledge of cars. "Hey, I've seen your car," he said, trying to sound casual but failing. "It's really something. I bet it's fun to drive." The wife looked at him calmly, her eyes steady and unflinching. "It is," she said simply, "but it's not something you just get to drive because you want to." The boy smirked, thinking she would be flustered or intimidated. But instead of reacting with anger or fear, the wife's composure and quiet confidence seemed to disarm him. There was an aura about her, a presence that was impossible to ignore. The more he tried to assert dominance, the more he realized he was being subtly challenged, not in a loud confrontation, but in the simple fact that she wasn't reacting the way he expected. Curiosity sparked in the boy's mind. He had assumed she was just a regular person, someone who might panic or try to avoid him. But the confidence in her stance and the ease with which she interacted with others made him pause. He noticed how people around her responded with respect and admiration, nodding politely, listening attentively to her words. There was something different about her, something he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't until later in the event that the revelation struck him. The wife was invited to demonstrate one of the cars on a small track, set up for safe driving experiences. She smiled politely and agreed, stepping behind the wheel of a car that looked surprisingly ordinary at first glance. The crowd cheered lightly, expecting a modest demonstration. The boy, still following, assumed it would be uneventful. The moment she started the engine, however, the boy's assumptions shattered. The car moved with precision and speed, every motion controlled with expertise and skill that was unmistakable. The wife navigated turns flawlessly, executed maneuvers that required incredible control, and handled the car with a confidence that could only come from years of professional experience. The crowd watched in awe, murmuring among themselves, impressed by her talent. The boy's smirk vanished, replaced by shock and disbelief. He had expected a casual driver, someone he could intimidate or impress with his audacity. Instead, he saw a professional, someone whose skills and confidence dwarfed anything he could imagine. The realization hit him hard. This wasn't just a car enthusiast. This was someone who had mastered control, speed, and precision to a level he couldn't hope to match. As the demonstration ended, the wife parked the car with ease, stepping out with a composed smile. The crowd applauded, and neighbors came over to compliment her, asking questions about her experience. The boy, meanwhile, lingered behind, unable to find words. The audacity that had fueled his obsession now met a wall of reality. He had underestimated her entirely. For the first time, the boy felt a sense of humility. The arrogance that had carried him through previous encounters faltered as he realized the gap between his assumptions and the truth. He had approached her with confidence, expecting to see a typical driver who could be flustered or intimidated. Instead, he encountered someone whose skill, poise, and experience made him seem almost insignificant in comparison. The wife noticed the boy's reaction and chose to address it subtly. She didn't mock or belittle him. Instead, she spoke with calm authority. "It's not just about wanting something," she said softly, addressing the unspoken tension. "It's about respect, skill, and understanding the value of what you admire. Wanting doesn't make it yours." The boy swallowed hard, realizing that this wasn't a lesson about cars alone. It was a lesson about humility, boundaries, and the consequences of entitlement. He had learned the hard way that audacity without understanding could lead to embarrassment, and that respect had to be earned, not demanded. For the wife and her husband, the incident marked a turning point. They had faced weeks of audacity and entitlement, and this event had highlighted not only her skills but also the importance of patience and composure. They returned home that evening with a renewed sense of confidence, knowing that the boy had finally encountered a reality that challenged his arrogance. The neighborhood, too, began to notice the shift. Whispers spread about the event and the demonstration, and many residents expressed admiration for how the wife handled herself and showcased her expertise. The boy, meanwhile, withdrew slightly, his attempts to impress or intimidate tempered by the realization that he had misjudged the situation entirely. Life in the neighborhood slowly returned to a quieter rhythm. The wife and husband continued their routines, maintaining their calm and enjoying their days while keeping an eye on the driveway and the occasional glance from the boy. The tension had lessened, replaced by a subtle awareness that boundaries had been clearly established and that entitlement could no longer dictate interactions. For the wife, the event was a reminder of the value of skill, confidence, and integrity. For the husband, it was a moment to reflect on their shared patience and the strength of their partnership. Together they had faced audacity with composure and respect, demonstrating that true confidence and ability often speak louder than arrogance and demands. And for the boy, the experience was unforgettable. The encounter left a lasting impression, challenging his assumptions and forcing him to reconsider how he approached others and the world around him. He had learned that admiration and desire were not the same as ownership, and that respect and humility were essential in dealing with people whose lives and experiences were far beyond his own. The days that followed were calmer. The boy no longer lingered as boldly near the driveway, and his attempts to assert entitlement diminished. The couple continued to enjoy their quiet life, their bond strengthened by the trials they had faced. The car remained in the driveway, gleaming as always, a symbol of achievement, skill, and patience. The neighborhood returned to its familiar rhythm, now with a subtle lesson embedded in the shared stories of that unforgettable weekend. Through it all, the wife and husband carried on with grace, knowing that challenges would arise in life, but that composure, confidence, and respect could guide them through even the most audacious encounters. The boy had learned a lesson he would not forget, and the couple had shown that true strength often lies in patience and integrity, qualities that left a lasting impact on those who witnessed the events unfold.